Okay, so we are talking about the residential listing agreement today. So we've got several things that we're going to be working on. Really, for the most part, I want to make sure there's a lot of disclosures, a lot of things that you guys can get into. Always remember to check SkySlope. SkySlope will give you a checklist of everything that you need. But we're going to go over a few, specific agreements today. One being the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. Some disclosures and just kind of go through those. So if you guys, along the way, if anybody has questions or anything, please let me know. Hang on, I've got somebody coming in. Move that over. Okay. So first thing I want to do is actually get into, let's pull up a residential, let's see, an exclusive right to sell. And this one is actually a listing agreement that Tommy actually had that was already done and complete. Can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. And if you guys have any questions, please let me know. As far as exclusive right to sell, pretty self-explanatory. Just read your documents really carefully. If you have questions or anything, definitely let us know. First name, or you've got, so this agreement is between obviously the seller and Realty One Group Revolution. All right, so you are the agent representing them, but it's actually the company that's representing the seller. So you want to have the full legal names of the sellers. What happens if you have got someone who is on title, on tax records and everything, and they were individual and now they are married? Does the new spouse have to be on the listing agreement?
Yes. One to buy, two to sell.
Perfect. Yes, absolutely. So, so first thing, obviously, is your seller's full legal name of both sellers, or one, just depends on who's on. It does get a little complicated if you have, if you end up with someone who has passed away and you've got someone that's representing the estate, things like that. That will get a little bit more complicated. We won't really touch on that today, but we're just going to go through pretty much your main listing documents. Anything that is highlighted, you want to make sure and take a look and read very carefully. It does actually refer to somebody being deceased in this particular paragraph. We're going to kind of go through, and I want to make sure we get through this. We get through some of the other documents. So if you guys have questions, please let me know. So we're going to go through and kind of highlight, make sure we kind of hit all of the buttons. But if anything comes up, if you've had experiences or you have questions at all, please let me know. So we've got the term of the agreement, typically the effective date of the contract. You can, if the property is currently listed. Now, we're not allowed to solicit business, but if someone approaches you and they've currently got a home listed, it hasn't sold, or for some reason they want to cancel an agreement with another agent, you can do paperwork ahead of time if they have solicited you. And so here you mark whether or not it is effective as of the date that you're signing or the date that the agreement with another agent is released. All right. And then you have an expiration date. All right. So here you might have, you determine, you work with your buyers, or your sellers. Listing agreements can be anywhere from 6 months to a year. They can be longer, they can be shorter. That's really kind of up to you guys. It's your preference. It's what you're working with your sellers. So at this point, we've assumed that you've done your seller presentation, they've agreed to list with you, and you're going through these documents. Some people will take documents with them to a listing appointment. You might do a one-time listing appointment. You might do a two-time listing appointment. Some people take paperwork with them on their very first appointment. Some people want to come back. So it really depends on your style and what you'd like to do. I know Erin actually does a lot of this. She doesn't print her paperwork. Good morning, Erin. She does a lot of this and has it on her iPad. So she takes her iPad with her. So whatever works for you guys is really the way to go. It's nice to be prepared. So if nothing else, have one with you, because you never know if a seller might be headed out of town. You might think that you're going to be going back for a second appointment. They might say, let's just go ahead and get this done. Let's get it taken care of. So it's good to have paperwork with you, whether you fill out all of this paperwork ahead of time and take it with you, or you have blanks in your car. Whatever you decide is what you really should do. So you've got your expiration date, and then the property information. Where are you going to find the property information?
Tax records.
Yes. And you can either go there through the MLS, right? If you've got a property, if you want to look up, if you're already doing, that your CMA, you've pulled the tax records. So that's where here's your information, and your information comes from your tax records. All right. Usually when it comes to, so now you've got your property information, your seller information. Now we want to talk about the property itself. Will somebody read this bullet that is highlighted in red for me?
The parties should not assume that an item will or will not be included in the sale based on an oral or written statement or understanding that this is not a part of the sales contract. Buyer and seller should be specific when negotiating what items will be included in or excluded from the sale.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So here we're starting to talk about the fixtures. What's included? What are the sellers leaving behind? If there are things, and a lot of the things typically as a general rule, if it's attached to the house, it should stay. But then you've got things like, people have their TVs hanging on the walls, things like that. So you just want to make sure that you're very clear with what stays and what doesn't stay. And you've got a pretty specific list here of really just about everything you can possibly think of that would be included, that would stay behind. Typically, if there are things that a seller really is super attached to, for example, they might have a dining room fixture that was an heirloom. Have them remove it before starting to show. You know what? If it's there, somebody's going to ask. And if it's something that's super important to that seller and they absolutely don't want to leave it behind, it's usually better just to remove it. If there's anything that's special, they're depersonalizing the property, they're trying to neutralize everything and get it ready to appeal to more buyers, let's just go ahead and remove it. That includes, if people have Ring doorbells, if they want to take things like that with them, have them make sure to remove things before you start showing. And then if they don't, just make sure that you're very specific on your listing agreement as to what is staying, what is going. Any questions on that? Anybody got any experiences they want to share on that to kind of help the group?
Also, sometimes refrigerator is not included. Mm-hmm. That's like a big one. And this last house I'm under contract with is the first time I've come across them actually not owning the refrigerator, so they couldn't leave the refrigerator. But that's in there too, that anything leased or not owned cannot be conveyed. So
right. And that will include your solar panels, guys. Make sure that I met with a seller recently who said that he had solar panels put on his house about 3 years ago. He is still making payments on those solar panels, but the way his is situated is if he sells the house, it is actually a second lien on the property, and so it will be taken care of out of the closing proceeds. So just make sure if you have solar panels or something, like Erin said, if they don't own that and it's staying with the property, make sure you know the details of that. That's the first that I've never heard of anybody not owning the refrigerator. Now, a lot of times people will say, I don't want to leave my refrigerator. All right. The house we bought a little over a year ago, the refrigerator was not included with the price of the house, but it became it did become something that was negotiated. So a lot of times your sellers may not want to include it, even if they plan to leave it behind, because they may want to use it as a bargaining chip or a negotiation tool. So keep that in mind. Any questions on exclusions or what's included, what's staying behind? All right, so here is where you would list anything that is leased or not owned by your seller, and be very specific on any items that do not convey. All right, again, it's best to remove them. Sometimes that's not always possible. Sometimes the seller doesn't have the ability to do it. And then if they are leaving something on here, number 4 is considered personal property and it is left at no additional value. A lot of times your offers will come in that way because it's no additional value. The lenders don't want to see a refrigerator or washer and dryer included as part of the loan. All right. Whether your seller or not, wants to, are they offering a home warranty? Do they have one on the house already? Can it be transferred? So there's different details there. And then of course your listing price. All right, listing price and what terms your seller will be able to accept. All right, cash, conventionals, pretty standard. If there are issues with repairs and things like that, that's when you will, kind of determine whether or not are they FHA eligible, are they VA eligible. Another one is if they are more rural, are they USDA eligible? So knowing what options you have to offer, the more options you have, the better. Of course, these days, obviously, everything is, pretty crazy. Things aren't hitting the market very well, or not staying on the market very long. So it's mostly, unfortunately, right now we're seeing a lot of cash and conventional, but don't dismiss other options of financing. People can still get financed. All right. Firm's compensation. All right. Now, remember here on your firm compensation, we as Realty One Group are taking the full commission, and then we are sharing and we are cooperating with the buyer agent. So your full commission goes here. This one, Tommy did 5%. I think it's because he actually had helped this client with the buy of this particular property. So I think when he sold it for her, he listed it for a little bit less. There is not a standard. All right, that's price fixing, and we're not allowed to do that. But so ultimately, you guys decide. Talk to your mentors, talk to your BICs, everything here. But before you start discounting, just make sure you're talking to somebody. And we don't want to be, we're not a discount brokerage. We are a full service brokerage and offer all the bells and whistles that come along with that. So you've got your firm compensation here, and it talks about details. It talks about if a sale, this doesn't come up quite as much, but if the, you know what, I'm going to skip that for now. It's really not at this point. If anybody has questions and things come up afterwards, if you guys need anything, definitely don't hesitate. Call me, text me, email. I'm here to help in any way I can. But here we just talk about, the fees due, how it's payable. Typically we are paid through closing. Talks about the business entity, attorney fees and costs. And then down here in section 8 is where we talk about cooperating with buyer agents. So here, Tommy did do 5%. So he did 2.5 with the buyer's agent, meaning 2.5 goes to our firm. If you're, and I see all kinds of stuff right now, and you guys have probably seen the same. I'm seeing everything in the buyer cooperation from 2.5 to 3. I've actually seen some new construction where it's a flat fee of $1,500 is all the buyer agent gets. So it's all over the board, but for the most part, right now I'm seeing for the mostly, 2.5 to 3%. Is anybody else seeing anything different?
I saw 1.75.
Oh, wow. Crazy, because you definitely earn your money on both sides. It's crazy. Yes, it sells fast, but you know what? There's so much more that goes along with it. So anyway, your buyer agent cooperation goes there. Firm duties. All right. Make sure to review this, talk about it. You're working for the seller here. Yes, there may be an opportunity or an option or something that comes up where dual agency is, but your first priority right here, right now with this paperwork is you are representing your seller. All right. So make sure you go through, you understand, you can read all of this, and you can explain this to a seller. A seller is probably not going to sit and read every bit of this form. So you need to be able to go through and highlight and talk to them about what each of the different paragraphs contains. All right. Here you're talking about, just different here you want to make sure you get your seller's initials, that they have been made aware of. All right, so you've thoroughly gone through what the firm does, what the firm doesn't do. All right, we can't, there's no discrimination, so they can't tell us that they want us to focus on a certain target group or anything else. I mean, we've got to stay neutral. Fair housing, everything applies, so we have to make sure that they understand that. They initial here. We talk about marketing. All right, so if you're marketing, obviously we cooperate with the MLS. You can do coming soon. If you have coming soon, rather than marketing it right away, there is a separate document for coming soon. So you have an additional document to do for that. Does talk about when you're going to begin marketing. All right, so you're going to put a date in here for that. Different things that your seller authorizes. All right, do they authorize a sign in the yard? Do they authorize open houses? Advertising other than on the internet? Not too many people do a lot of print anymore, but there are still agents that do print advertising. Is that okay? Coming soon advertising. If you're doing a coming soon, that's where you'll make note of that here. And then also, obviously they authorize internet advertising. That's kind of a given these days.
Michelle, you also need to make sure, this is what happened with my son and daughter-in-law's townhome. The HOA does not allow signs at all. However, they kind of overlook the for sale signs on the property, but you cannot put directional signs or anything anywhere else. It has to be on your property. They won't get upset with that, but they will if it's anywhere else. So make sure it's okay with an HOA.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Erin, for sure. You may be able to, in some cases, you may have to, depending upon the neighborhood, you may not be able to put your own sign in. You may have to get something that is specifically designed for the neighborhood. Yes, it can have your name on it, your phone number, but it actually is something that is HOA approved. There are some very specific signage, so do make sure that you understand what the signage requirements are of the neighborhood. And it's a good idea to know all of that before you go for your listing appointment. All right, just so there's no surprises. So in some cases, it may cost you a little bit extra for your signage. And then where can you put those? If you can only put it in the yard, then that means no directionals. And so you're relying more on MLS and buyer's agents to find you. All right, but yes, thank you very much, Erin. Does your seller allow a lockbox? All right, remember you've got super key lock boxes and combo lock boxes. So whatever you do, just make sure that your sellers are okay with that. And you can buy your lock boxes through the MLS. You can buy them new, and they also sell used ones. So they're a little less expensive. If you're going to go with combo boxes, you can pick those up from the realtor store, or even Lowe's or Home Depot sells lock boxes. So just depends what you're planning to do. The good thing about the Supras is they are very, very secure. You have to be an agent or an appraiser or somebody with super access, and you can determine what times of day they can get in. So there's a lot of benefits to having the Supra, and it does make sellers feel more secure, especially if they are still living in the property. I typically will use Supras on a property that is still occupied, maybe a combo lockbox on a property that's vacant. So it just kind of depends. Depends on area and different things. If you need contractors and stuff in and out of there, and you're kind of helping to facilitate some of that, if a seller has moved on and they're maybe out of state, then you might need a combo lockbox on it while those repairs are being done. Then maybe you add a Supra when it's time for listings, the showings to begin. So it's kind of up to you guys. So then we kind of go through a little bit forward here, a little bit further here. And this just talks about, during open houses, seller acknowledges, they're really, they're making sure. Now, one thing to be careful of is a lot of people have cameras and videos anymore. All right. It's not authorized to video. You can video, but they're really not supposed to be audio as well. But I would just be very careful. You never know what somebody's got in their house. So you never know when they might be recording and when they might not be. But here we it's addressed for the seller. So you do want to make sure and go through, talk to them about these different things, and make sure that they're good. You want them to make sure and put up any valuables, cash, jewelry, firearms, medications, tools, make sure everything is locked up. I actually represented a seller once that a buyer came in, and that buyer actually, my seller called me later, and there was some money missing out of a drawer in the bedroom. So
Michelle,
yes.
it's Karen. I just am curious, how would you address the request that the audio should not be on when the open houses or showings are going through? I know that a number of my clients in Florida, they always had the audio on all the time, but how do you say to them, it really is, it's unlawful? Do you just say it like that?
And I would just tell them that. Just say, we all have cameras now. We all are about home security, but please be aware that while we are selling your home, it is unlawful to actually record somebody their audio. It's find a video, you can see, you can watch, you can make sure they're not taking anything or doing things that they shouldn't be, but it is unlawful to record the audio. You're not allowed to do that without someone's permission. And that's all you can do, Karen. I mean, you've given them that information. You've basically done your part of the disclosure. You can't control if they actually follow it. And I hate to say it that way, but it's true.
Right, you can lead the horse to water.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're telling them, here it is in big bold in red. The next, big bold red it is actually illegal. It's a federal crime. So make sure they're aware of that. It's in red. You give them copies of this listing agreement, and this is where you go through that and talk to them about it. All right. So it's here to protect you, but ultimately you've done your disclosure. Okay. Any other questions? Okie dokie. All right. So is this listing going to be an office exclusive? All right. Typically, we don't do that. I mean, I'll be honest, I've never done an office exclusive. I don't know why any seller would not want to have as much exposure for their property as possible. All right. On any of these, if there is any kind of boxes, just remember, if you come back up here, you're looking at, for example, like the personal property. If nothing is being left behind, you want to make sure and put NA. All right. If you were not leaving a refrigerator, washer, and dryer, just NA through everything. It saves anything from being added later. All right. So let's see. Let's get back down to here. Okay, earnest money. I mean, you do want to talk about the process with your clients. All right, so explain the difference if they don't know. Some people have, sorry, I went a little too far. Some people have not sold a home since we've had both earnest money and due diligence money. So you'll want to explain the difference between those two. Come on. Oh, computer, don't do this to me. Sorry, guys, it's going a little slow. My mouse. Come on. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know what's happening. I scrolled too far, and then now it's not cooperating. It's going very slow. Oh my gosh. Hang on, we're almost there. Why I'm scrolling, does anybody have any questions? Okay, stop. Oh, Lord. No, it's going too far. Okay. All right. Oh my gosh. Okay, hang on. I'm frozen. It's like out of mind of its own. I'm not moving anything. All right, give me 1 second. I'm going to reopen this. Give me 1 second. Sorry, guys. All right. Let's get back to this. Okay, here we go. Back on track. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, so difference between earnest money. I mean, explain the differences between earnest money, due diligence, let them know the differences between that. And that, you know, earnest money is written out to which we do not hold earnest money, remember? So if the buyer comes in, they're going to have either their agency, their buyer's agent's firm, or an attorney holding the escrow. Or the earnest money. Due diligence is made directly to the seller. They keep that money, but if something happens and the contract falls apart, it is up to both the buyer and the seller to sign off before earnest money can be released. All right. A little further down here, we go down to the seller representations. All right, so we're going to start getting into some of the other disclosures. But here the seller is disclosing, is the property in a floodplain? Do they have synthetic stucco? Are they part of an owner's association? All right. In the case of no and A, if there is, then you want to make sure that you're adding in the information about the HOA and who they are who's the contact person. Does the seller have a termite bond on the house? All right. If they do, is it transferable? What kind of price? Termite company, everything. All right. Here they're disclosing if they have owned the property for at least 1 year. All right. Or if they have not. Sample forms. All right. What forms do we have to give to a seller? We want to make sure and give them a sample of the offer to purchase and contract. All right. You also want to make sure you're giving them a sample of the professional services disclosure. Here, you're acknowledging that you have given both of those to them. Do they have any liens on the property? All right. What is their current mortgage balance? This can be important. You wouldn't think so. And these days it might not be as important, but I actually had a seller once who told me what their balance was. And when we got to closing, a couple days before closing, we found out they owed more than what they told me they owed. And they had to come to closing with a bunch of money that they did not have. So that was kind of a tight fit and turned into an issue. So make sure that they let you know, do they have one loan on the property? Do they have two? Do they have a second lien that they know of, such as the solar panels? All right. So just making sure that you're aware, you're representing them. And the best way for you to represent them is if you have all of the information. Do they have, or are they currently under any kind of bankruptcy statutes? Is the property being leased? So really you've kind of, you're just kind of going down the checkbox. FHA appraisal. All right. Why is this one important? Why do they not put anything on here as far as appraisals? Has an appraisal been done on the property within the past 4 months? Why is this important? Anybody know?
Because an FHA appraisal is attached to the property.
Correct. So if they say for example, they had the house under contract before and an FHA buyer came in, they had the property appraised, and then for whatever reason, that sale did not go to closing. If they list the property again, that FHA appraisal sticks to the property, not the buyer. So the buyer usually owns their appraisal that they've paid for, but with FHA, it follows the property. And so that is public knowledge. All right. Any special assessments? Now, what is the difference between, what is a special assessment, first of all?
Any type of improvements from the city, like streetlights or sidewalks or any type of enhancements to the community.
Perfect, exactly. And there is a difference between proposed and confirmed, all right? So an HOA, the city, I mean, you can have different organizations that might be doing assessments, but you've got proposed and you've got confirmed. So is the seller aware of anything, all right? Is the property a manufactured home? All right, if there is, there's other things that are involved, and you've got, if it's a mobile home, there's usually, just like a car, it has a VIN number attached. So there's different things that you need to be aware of there. Is there a fuel tank? All right, is the fuel tank owned or is it leased? So you've got information there. Seller's duties. All right, this just kind of goes through a list of the different things that the seller's responsible for. Residential property disclosure, the MOG, lead-based paint, if the property is older than 1978, providing restrictive covenants, anything that they were aware of, these are just a list of things, any title insurance information, things that they can provide to the buyer, all right? Including, I mean, they obviously need to be able to turn over clear, clean property and a general warranty deed. So this is the list of the seller's responsibilities. All right. There is a short note here, property may be a short sale consideration. If so, additional addendums. Is it, pre-foreclosure, short sale, additional paperwork there? We won't cover that in this particular class, but, we can certainly, if anybody has questions or anything, if you're running into anything, if you've got a situation, just let us know. All right, let somebody know. Either I'm happy to answer questions. Your BIC usually is a good one. Home inspection. All right, has anybody here done pre-listing home inspections? This is a question of your sellers. Do you want to get a home inspection before we list the property? Why would someone do that when they know the buyer's going to come in and do it?
Maybe they have a heads up on any glaring repairs that need to be done so that they can be listing them, or just making sure that they are aware that that could come down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah, perfect. And that's exactly. So it's one, knowing what you've got, knowing what's coming up. Is there anything that's going to come up in home inspections that might kill your deal? These days, I don't know. I mean, as a buyer's agent, I know there's, probably not a lot of people arguing for, home inspections or home improvement, or repairs and things. But some of them, if you know there's something coming up, plus not only that, sometimes it can make a property stand out on the market if you can advertise it as home has been pre-inspected and repairs have been made. I mean, it just goes to show that the seller has taken extra steps to, make sure that the house is ready for sale. Anybody have anything to add to that? Any questions?
Well, I was just going to say earlier that my daughter-in-law did get her HVAC inspected before. I mean, the property was only 5 years old, but she's like uber, like, I don't know what you want to call it. But anyway, she did have stuff inspected beforehand just to make sure that everything was okay. Because she wasn't like she didn't want anything surprises. She just wanted everything to be perfect for whoever was going to buy it. So
nice. Well,
yeah.
and when you're negotiating, it's like sometimes, the problem can be it's not necessarily in this particular market, but we're not always going to be in this market. A lot of times when you have a buyer come in and they are making an offer, it is based on, them wanting the property, obviously, and following through with everything. But a lot of times if you don't have the home pre-inspected, there can be repairs that come up later that end up costing the seller money. They either have to reduce the price or they have to get it repaired. And so they're not necessarily netting as much as they initially were when they first went under contract. So a pre-inspection or a pre-listing home inspection can actually kind of dovetail that a little bit, or, you know, kind of save the seller. At least then they know what they're in for. All right. So that might be an opportunity. And so it's just a question for you to ask them. And if they ask why, then that's exactly, you let them know why they might want to do that. Here they will need to acknowledge that you've also given the seller a copy of questions and answers on home inspections. Now, one quick thing while we're talking about disclosures, I just want to make sure everybody is aware that we have a new working with real estate agents disclosure and questions and answers on that. So as of July 1, you need to be using the new ones. All right. You can, if you've already got agreements in place, things with clients, with buyers and sellers, you can still have the old ones on file, but beginning July 1, anything going forward needs the new working with real estate agents disclosures. Okay. And it's actually, they're actually a little bit easier. One for buyer, one for seller. The disclosure, the questions and answers brochure is exactly the same, but it's just a real quick one pager for each one. All right. And if anybody has questions on that, let me know, or let, you know, Andrea or Diana or Tommy know if you guys have any questions. Any additional terms? All right. Anything that you may be, any additional terms for this agreement, anything that you might be wanting to go over with the seller, something that you've agreed to. Maybe they've said, well, you know, if we don't sell it in 3 months, you know, I may decide to go ahead and pull it back. Or, I mean, you know, just, it could be any number of things. Does anybody have any experience on any additional terms and conditions they might add in here? Any thoughts on that? Okay. So in this case, you put NA in there. All right. And then the next section goes over dual agency. All right. Now, remember, you may not act as a dual agent, but you need to make your seller aware that it is possible that one of our team may bring us a buyer. All right. So if they bring us the buyer, even if you're representing the seller, another agent from our firm brings in a buyer, that is considered dual agency. So you just want to make sure and explain to them. All right. Make sure that they're okay with that. If they're not okay with that, they're going to have to initial. But here's where they make initials to, you know, whether or not they accept dual agency, or in the event that in the future, designated dual agency may come into play. All right. Meaning you won't represent the buyer and the seller in the same transaction. All right. We would assign a second agent to represent a buyer. All right. Any questions on dual agency? And okay, any mediation? Just a quick, you know, wire fraud information. There's a ton of information out there. There's a ton of wire fraud. So this one's important. You want to make sure that your sellers are not providing information, but directly to the attorney's office when it comes time for closing. Seller proceeds, I don't want to touch any of that. So I don't even want them to send me their contact information. I let them send it directly to the attorney. So when if your buyer comes in and they send over a seller information sheet from the attorney's office, best to fill out what you can, send it to your seller, have them send it directly to the attorney's office. All right. Too much wire fraud going on, and I don't want anything in my files that is going to compromise my clients or our firm for that matter. Okay. And that is it. I mean, that's the entire agreement. That's the just exclusive right to sell listing. Any questions on that? Okay, so I do want to go over, there's a couple of other disclosures and things that are pretty important that you have to get right off the bat. Usually better to do it all at one time. Second is going to be the residential property disclosure. All right, North Carolina requires all sellers provide this to any buyer within how many days of offer?
it 2 days?
10?
It's 3 actually. So, but if you're the listing agent, get it done, put it in the MLS, just make sure there's nothing. And just kind of an FYI, if you guys are out going and talking to FSBOs, this is something that you can come from contribution with a FSBO. Now make sure if you do provide this to a FSBO, because I actually called a FSBO last week and they were trying to sell their house, and I asked them if they had the property disclosure, and she said no, that's why they were trying to sell it on their own. Does not matter. By law, any seller must provide the residential property disclosure and the mineral and oil and gas rights and lead-based paint if applicable, or a buyer has the right to cancel the contract. So if you are building rapport, if you're coming from contribution, you can. I actually went and dropped off a copy of the disclosures to the FSBO and just left my business card. If you have any questions, please let me know. It is required now. They can find this online. They don't have to get it from us, but I will tell you one thing. If you are downloading these from zip forms, keep in mind, look down here at the bottom, it's got your name on it. So if you are providing this for a FSBO and you're not signing a listing agreement with them, make sure to print a blank copy of it that does not have your information on it. Okay. But essentially the residential property disclosure, you don't fill these out, guys. Make the seller do it. You don't want to have your name, your signature. You don't want any reason for a seller to come back and say, well, I didn't say that we had, no plumbing fixtures issues or no, I mean, this is something the seller's been living there. So it's up to the seller to, answer the questions truthfully. They can, it's up to them. This is their disclosure for a buyer. They're the ones that are familiar with the property. Now they can do no representation. All right. On most all of this, but there's a few things that they can't. If this discloses any issues or defects that they know in, just very different parts of the property. And then the second page goes into, easements. It goes into your, we were just talking about assessments, anything that's aware of, are they part of an HOA? So this is their opportunity. They are required to provide this information for any buyers. Okay, so you just, and if in a listing appointment, if they don't have the time to fill it all out, I mean, you can sit there with them and actually walk them through it, but ultimately it's up to them to fill it out and complete it. All right, your signature's not on here anywhere. All right, what does, are they part of an HOA? What's included with those HOA fees? What are the HOA fees? How often are they paid? Are they monthly? Is there one HOA? Is there multiple HOAs? So you'll have different things with that as well. All right. Any questions on that? Okay, and then on the flip side, you've also got the mineral and oil and gas rights disclosure. All right, this is also mandatory. They may not know. They can sign no representation on some of it, and other pieces of it they can't. But again, this is something that is from the seller to the buyer, so they need to actually fill out these disclosures. I see agents do this, and that just gives me the heebie-jeebies. I mean, you can do it. You need to walk through it with them, and they ultimately sign it. All right. Any questions on the MOG?
I have a question, Michelle.
Sure.
The disclosures as well as the offer to purchase, should that be sent prior to the agreement for them to read over? And then when I get to the appointment, we could go over it together. What do you suggest?
You absolutely can do that. I typically don't. I typically will do most of this with them. I'll sit down with them when we're going through the paperwork and do it together with them. Just because I think the less intimidating before I get there, the better. I mean, if I send anything ahead of time, it's usually a very brief, you can have just information about the appointment, what we're going to cover. You could do a basic CMA. I know sometimes Tommy will actually send the CMA with just before his appointments, not like a day or two ahead of time, because one of the things you want to do is be careful when you're doing a CMA is you want to make sure that somebody doesn't take your CMA and then decide to go list it as a for sale by owner. And that can happen. I mean, it's the risk of what we do, but that's one of the reasons Tommy does his CMA, and he'll send over a brief CMA through RPR right before his appointment. So they have time to look over it and see what the numbers were. But then you also, if you haven't seen the inside of that property, you know, there's a chance that you may decide, you know what, this CMA that I did is really, it needs to be done more thoroughly. I didn't realize that you had made all these upgrades to the house. The house was only 10 years old, but I didn't realize you had done all of these things. So I'd really like to go back and really rework the numbers to be more appropriate. So it's kind of up to you. I typically don't send these out ahead of time, but you can, absolutely. Good question. Any other questions? Okay, another one. So those right there, I mean, so you've got your exclusive right to sell, your residential property disclosure, your mineral, oil, and gas rights. Those are all mandatory. And again, refer to SkySlope, because there are other things that are suggested, and we would rather you have other disclosures that you need to have for the firm. They're not necessarily mandatory. Here's the professional services disclosure and election. All right, this basically works for both buyers and sellers, and it basically just shows which services your client has offered to partake in, you know, and whether they've selected those services, whether they waived those services, who the provider was, who ordered it. This is a CYA document, basically. All right. So this is to make sure that, you know, a seller doesn't come back and say, well, you know, you didn't tell me I could get an HVAC inspection on my property ahead of time, and now it's going to cost me $5,000 because there's proper, you know. So this just covers you guys. All right. So this is really something that is highly, highly encouraged for everybody to use. And you can see, I mean, if you've got a buyer, are they going to order a survey? All right. I always recommend a survey, but if a buyer says no, seller provided one, then you just want to make sure that you've got documentation that says that they waived that. All right. So that there's never a he said, she said. All right. So professional services disclosure. You've also got your seller net sheet. All right. Can you go through, and when you know, you can show the seller, all right, here's what we have as far as initial, you know, this is what we're going to list the property at. If we get a full price offer, we're going to go through and we're going to show you basically what you're going to, what's your net. All right. After closing costs, attorney fees, if you provide a home warranty, your mortgage payoff. So here's your seller net sheet. All right. So you can go through all of these. Any questions on any of those? And again, it's just reading through all your documents, know what's required, look through SkySlope, your checklists are there. They're always going to back you. And you've always got, I mean, so many people that are there to answer any questions if you guys need anything. If you have questions on anything we've covered today or just anything in general, please let me know if I can help. Anybody have any questions?
I don't have a question, Michelle, but I would love to be able to do a rev up on this seller net sheet, because I know, you know, a lot of sellers want to know exactly, well, not exactly, you know, a good guesstimate of what they're going to be walking away with in their pocket. And I'd like to, you know, be able to get these numbers, where to find these numbers, you know, how to plug them in, et cetera.
Okay. Yeah. You know what I'll do is I will talk to Amanda and Andrea and Diana and Tommy about it, and see if we can't add something onto the calendar. Make sure you're always checking your calendars. So the Rev Up classes come from corporate essentially. And so there's a certain list of what we teach in those, but then we're also teaching extra classes. So make sure to check the calendar and see what other classes we're offering. And so I will suggest that to them. I mean, some of the classes I know we've done has been, you know, actually getting in and filling out, you know, an offer. If you're representing a buyer on a particular property, we could do, you know, so there's different things, but the seller net sheet, I'll make a note and I'll let them know that you would like to add that to the to the training calendar.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, anybody else have anything? Anything you need, anything you request? I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording, I think.
Okay, so I have a question.
Yes.
I just want to make sure, and part of this is because, like I said earlier, my daughter-in-law gets really anxious and she's kind of a perfectionist and stuff. We're under contract now on their townhome. Is there anything? I mean, I did sell some land, and it was just like that was like the easiest thing. It was cash, it went super fast. Am I just kind of waiting for the attorney to send me documents or what, like as far as the seller side is concerned?
Yes, I mean, for the most part, you're waiting for the attorney, you're waiting for the buyer's agent. I mean, for them to, schedule inspections, but keep an eye on your dates, just because obviously
Right.
if the seller says, so have you heard anything from the buyer? Have you heard anything here? I like to keep in touch with the agents on the buyer side just to see if they have any questions. Do they need to come back for anything? When are the inspections? When are they expecting that to be scheduled? How's everything going on the mortgage side, if there is one?
Okay.
Just to stay on top of things so that your sellers, you can keep your sellers updated.
Okay.
But yeah,
All
it's really on the buyer's agent at this point. You're under contract. It is kind of on the buyer's agent at this point.
I just feel nervous. I'm like going, am I forgetting something? Am I forgetting something?
I know.
And she's going to keep asking me, and I'm just like going, no, we're just waiting, So,
Well, and that's why if you kind of check in, I like to check in with the buyer's agents. If I haven't heard anything, it kind of depends how long, like the due diligence period is and how long closing. I like to check in with the agents weekly.
Yeah.
Just to check in, see how things are going. Are we expecting, when, I mean, if they haven't notified you of inspections, I'd be asking, and then, are we expecting any kind of repair requests? I mean, I like to check in with them weekly.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thanks.
You bet.
Michelle, one question that I have for you, going back to the listing agreement.